In this video I'm going to talk about my setup for marking, and it doesn't matter if I'm marking parachutes or marking orny wings, whatever. I mark a lot of stuff. So I start with it's a fine tip Sharpie. I use either a silver or a black, and depending on what material I'm using dictates which marker that I use. Also, you can see that I have a piece of press board, and this press board has markings on it that whenever I take it to the machine and line it up, there's a certain way that the board has to be put on the machine in order for the marks to line up. In other words, if I turn it around and put it on the machine's still going to mark it the way it's normally going to mark it, but now the pattern that I have on here is wrong. So I use these marks to line up the material. Now to start with, I take the material and I have a couple of marks that I have on my board, one being a long one here and then a dash here and here. And what that tells me is if I bring my material to those marks and line it up and then flatten it out, now I can cut my material to the outer edge of the board, and it'll be the right size for this particular pattern. So I'll put that over there to hold it. I'll go ahead and mark this. So again, I'm just going to be running around the edge of the board. I'll have to be real critical. And now my material is cut, and I'm ready to go ahead and tape it down. Now what I do is I set my material back and I make sure that it covers all the marks by adjusting the material so that I have marks all the way around on the material. Now I can go ahead and tape the material down, and for this I just used some masking tape and pull the material with all the wrinkles out of it. Nothing really fancy here. So I tape the four corners, and then I put a little tape in the middle here, again just to pull it flat so that the material is now laying flat on the table or flat on my board. So now I'll take this over to the machine, line it up on the machine, and then I'll be ready to mark it out. Okay, here's a look at the machine, and what I've done is, first off, I've elevated my table so that my board is capable of hanging over. Now you can see my pen is actually hanging over the normal area, cutting area of my bit, so therefore I need my board to hang over that I'm going to be marking on, because no matter where I put it, from the center of the bit I have 49 inches from one end to the other, and 25 inches from front to back. And so no matter where this is at, I have that same distance. So if I stop my board here, I'm actually going to lose this amount on the other end. So therefore I would not be able to make the cut, or in this case mark it out, because I would only be getting 46, a little better than 46 inches of travel rather than the 48. And this is actually what makes up the marking device. I have a Sharpie pen with a fine point, and then I have an apparatus that I created that actually fits in the holes that were already in my machine. And so what happens is I slide this in, and then there's a hole up in the front here in which I place a screw that rides in this slot, and that allows this to move up and down and float. So it keeps it from spinning, which keeps the pen at the same angle. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and thread my lock in, to the point where it's just about ready to grab the pin. And then I'll slide the pin up, and now it's grabbed it. So I'll just tighten it up, finger tight. Now you can see that's floating. So even if my table is not level or the board is not flat, the pin is not actually driven into the material, it's allowed to float. So I took a piece of carbon and attached it, a carbon tube, and put a slit in it so that it springs, so you can see that it spreads to grab the pin, but yet it's flexible enough that it lets me remove the pin. So I go ahead and secure the pin, remove the top, and now I'm ready to start marking. Okay, now to load the material, I know that I need my board to be at this edge right here, and the outside of the board to be at this edge here. So I also know that the tail, which is in this area here, needs to be on this end. So my board just slides up here. I'm going to hold it flush to the edge here, and I'm just going to move it out so that it's flush with the inside of this angle. And now my board is in position. So now I'll check and make sure that my material is flat, make sure I don't have any serious wrinkles in my material, and I'm ready to go ahead and start to mark. Okay, and now the marks are finished, and so the machine's going to move out of the way, and now it's just simply pull up the material and reload the board, and then put it back in the machine and mark the next panel.